Hi, I'm Nahm, and I'm really excited here to share with you our latest thoughts on unlocking growth. Unlocking growth is something that is very important to us because what we found is that if companies don't unlock growth, we tend not to make money. And if they unlock growth, then it becomes an exciting company that investors want to invest in, great people want to join, and we end up doing very well. So as a result, it's something that we saw as sort of critical in our success or failure in our companies, and so we've been investing a lot of time thinking about it. The first manifestation and sharing of our thoughts was in the book Survival to Thrival, which recently got translated into Korean, and really want to thank Dr. Che for doing the hard work in the translation. But it was the first book that where we shared our thoughts about unlocking growth. And the reason why I wanted to come here today was sort of share with you sort of a second generation thoughts that we have on unlocking growth as well too. So as I was talking about why we focus so much on unlocking growth, because it's the way that we either make money or lose money as investors. And in ways, it's the same thing for entrepreneurs as well too. So what we said in the first book was basically this diagram here, which describes the journey from founding an idea to becoming a unicorn. So in the beginning, you try to find product market fit with happy customers. We introduced this concept of go-to-market fit as a new term to unlock growth, and then you scale and optimize growth to become a category leader. And what we call here a surfing unicorn. Just to summarize, what we find is finding product market fit is relatively easy. We've had very few investments fail because they couldn't find product market fit. To find product market fit, what you really just need to do is just listen to your teaching customers and iterate rapidly, and with that, you should get some happy customers. Then what many people assume is because you have happy customers, you're ready to scale and optimize growth and becoming a category leader. Here again, the way to become a category leader is fairly simple. You need to ride this, what we call virtuous cycle, where you're the one that acquires customers faster than others, so you're recognized as the category leader, so you can raise money at a higher valuation than anyone else, and then with that money you hire great employees, and then you invest more aggressively in sales and marketing, so you get even more customers, recognize category leader, and you keep riding this cycle to raise $10 million, $50 million, $100 million, $500 million at a time. And so with that, you become the category leader and the unicorn in that category. But what we found and what we introduced in the first book is this concept that this missing step, finding go-to-market fit, is the key. And that if you don't do this, you don't unlock growth, and companies tend to fail. And what we call unlocking growth, what we define it is that when you have repeatable and scalable growth, the leading metric is you get a lot of leads. And the lagging metric is you have a good magic number which measures your sales and marketing productivity. So this is what we outlined in the first book, and as we distributed it globally, talked to a lot of people, including our companies, the question really comes down to then was, well, how do you actually unlock growth? In our first book, we outlined sort of in general steps how we have seen companies do it and how we recommend companies. But what we found as we went through our companies that they want actually more specificity, more examples to make it really into a workable recipe. And that's why I'm here today, because I wanted to sort of share that with you, and more importantly, open to questions throughout the presentation or afterwards. Because this is a way that we can also get better. So, as I mentioned, many companies are stuck at product market fit and they just can't unlock growth. And these companies are what we have in this illustration is like the paddling unicorn. It's very tiring, it's very frustrating. You're so close to surfing, but you're not. And that's the frustration you feel versus the surfing unicorn who has got the momentum of the wave. And so what we see in the paddling phase many times is what we call founder-led growth, where you have a founder who's like a Superman or a superwoman who does amazing thing closing deals. They tend to be very passionate, empathetic with customers, and can creatively come out with the right solution for that particular customer. It's great, but it's hard to clone founders, It's hard to find people just like that. So what we need is this process and step to go from founder-led growth, where the founder says, just be like me, to unlocking growth. And there what we found is that the first two things that are important is you have to generate a lot of leads that gives you momentum and it feels like you've caught the wave. So you go from paddling to catching the wave. The second thing you need is to have the right surfboard for the wave, and we call that building the go-to-market playbook, and that gives you repeatability. I'm going to go into each of these in just a second in terms of how you generate a lot of leads and how you build this playbook and so forth. But just want to outline those two things we find to be critical to unlock growth. The next phase is after you've unlocked growth is where you want to scale and optimize growth. And that's about operationalizing the playbook that gives you scale, and it feels like you're riding the wave. And the next is also how you're using metrics to keep iterating the playbook to optimize your ride so you can improve it. And so by doing that, you can win the race to become the category leader or the surfing unicorn. So let's talk about the first one, catching the wave. Basically, you want to first see a big wave like this and be able to catch it. And with that, you generate a lot of leads and you feel momentum. So how do you generate a lot of leads? The typical answer we hear from many founders, CEOs, and other investors is, just hire a superhero lead generator. Someone who's just fantastic at it. It's like hire Thor, Hire a marketer who's great at inbound thought leadership, demand generation, or hire a sales leader who's great at outbounding prospect or hiring and managing SDRs, or a business development person that can find the best partnerships, whatever. And it's all about hiring the right superhero. That's important. But what we see is that, even Thor needs a hammer. And what's important is that there are certain key go-to-market blocks or questions, if not answered, no superhero can succeed here. And those are simple questions of why buy now, which is the urgent pain, and who is your target customer, which is the ideal customer profile and use case. Without those two answers, clear answers, no amount of marketing, sales, BD seems to work and generate leads. So what happens is that if you have these two blocks and you combine it with some awareness activity, and that is how potential customers in your ICP become aware of you, that can be over social, it could be over advertising, thought leadership, referrals, partners, outbound, whatever method you want to use. But you do those methods to drive awareness combined with answering the urgent pain and the who question that generates leads. Another way of looking at it is that if you're like an archer and you want to shoot to get leads, the who answer tells you where to shoot, and the urgent pain is your arrow. Without that, nothing is going to work, no matter how great an archer you may have. So why is this urgent pain so important? What is the urgent pain? It answers the question, why buy now, not 6 months from now? It encourages action. It justifies the company to buy from a startup. And the problem here is that the urgent pain changes over time. And the other is that each ideal customer profile and use case will have their own urgent pain. So if you're going after large enterprise as your ICP or SMB as your ICP, they will likely have different urgent pains. So going back to, why this urgent pain is so important is that you need to look from a customer standpoint. If you look from a customer standpoint, I like this diagram, founders always think I've got the best technology, everyone's stupid if they don't buy from me. But if you look from the other side, this is how they look at founders. It's like looking at these young doctors and asking yourself the question, do you want to be their very first patient? No matter how smart they are, how well connected, whatever, rarely do a patient want to go to a young doctor and be their very first patient. So if you start with the assumption customers should never buy from an early stage startup, why take the risk? It's always better to take the safe and easy decision. So if they have to buy now, then there's a good chance they will buy from a startup. If they can wait 6 or 12 months, then why take the risk? So that's why this urgent pain is so important, that if you don't have it, it's very hard to begin your go-to-market motion here. So how do you find the urgent pain? We found this exercise to be very helpful. And the whole point here is, the first thing is to overcome what you hear many times when you do startups is you got to focus, focus, focus. And so what that means is focus on the founding idea. So the most important thing in the beginning is you have to cast a wider net. So we think of the net in terms of one axis, different customer profiles, like SMB, large enterprise, small, but different customer profiles and different use cases. And so the bullseye is the founding idea. So when you're pursuing the founding idea, it's best to look around and see if there's a hotspot with the urgent pain around you. And in this particular case, it's to the right of the founding idea. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So at Mobile Iron, we started with a company to basically manage and secure smartphones. Windows, Symbian, and others for large enterprise. So customer profile, large enterprise, use case was managing and securing smartphones. Well, it turns out the hotspot was, this is when iPhone was first getting launched. Executives bought iPhones for Christmas, came back to the office after holidays and told IT, I want to switch from BlackBerry to iPhone. IT said, well, we don't support iPhones. CEO says that's an unacceptable answer. So the use case came simply as just support iPhones for executives in large companies. And they were closing deals left and right. Another example is a company called Spring Health. The founder is actually a Korean American. I think she's the youngest CEO of a unicorn. The company is worth $2 billion, and she's 28 years old. And she read our book and used it as sort of methodology when she was going from 1 million to 4 million in revenue. They're now a healthy 9-digit revenue company. So their technology was, how do you use AI for mental health? And their founding idea was, okay, our ideal customer, target customer will be mental health care providers, doctors. And the use case is how we can improve healthcare for the patients. Well, they got some customers, they got some happy customers and all that, but they just could not unlock growth. They looked at an adjacent customer segment as well, which was hospitals, but there again, it was just not an urgent pain. It was nice to have, but not an urgent pain. Then they heard that employers, HR departments are very concerned about this issue because of the fact that in the US, healthcare by employers many times are covered by the employer, and so they want to lower their cost by reducing mental health care issues. So they talked to HR departments, and for the first time, they found that people were really excited about what they're doing, and they were leaning in and asking them, I want more, let's move fast, and so forth. So that turned out to be the urgent pain, was solving and predicting mental health issues for HR in companies for their employees. And with that, they took off. So that's an example where it's really important, as I said, to find the urgent pain. So once you have that, and as I mentioned, you get a lot of leads, and it feels like when you're surfing, you got this big wave behind you versus paddling. Well, the next thing is, you got to have the right surfboard to catch that wave, because without that, you're not going to be able to ultimately ride it. And that's what we talk about, building the go-to-market playbook, and what that gives you is repeatability. And so what is this playbook? When we talk about it with many of our companies, the first thing they say is, give me your go-to-market playbook. I get like a 30-page document, a 60-page document, and so forth. The problem with that is no one reads a 30 or 60-page document. What you want is something as simple as just one page, maybe two. And it's really hard to make something short versus long, it turns out, because you have to find the real essence of what is important. The next thing is that this go-to-market playbook is not for just the CEO or like the VPs or the CEO and the investors. It's really for the newest employees. So when a new salesperson, new marketing person comes in, they know what they need to do, why they need to do it, and all that, so that you can get immediate productivity. So with that, you want a go-to-market playbook, which is repeatable and simple, and with that, you get predictability and scalability. So let's first talk about an example of a playbook. So a playbook in general can be viewed like this. So as I mentioned, you want it to be simple or one page. The left-hand side, we find very helpful to really answer the question, who? Who's the ideal customer profile and the ideal use case, so you know what this playbook is targeting. The top is answers the question why, and it outlines the customer journey. And we'll talk more about exactly what we mean by the customer journey. And then the rest of it is sort of how to move customers along their customer journey with the kind of actions that people in the company need to take at each stage, whether it's a sales and marketing, product customer success, and going through this. So here's an example of a mobile iron playbook, the one I mentioned to you where the urgent pain was when execs want to replace their BlackBerry with iPhones. That's the urgent pain. The ICP is enterprises, so these are execs and enterprise that come in, want this. And so now what it is you need to get awareness, and then after each stage here, you go from awareness and interest to engage in a first meeting, engage in a second meeting, trial, get them to decide that this is who they want to go with, and finally you close the deal. So this is the stages that in a mobile iron sales process was the stages that they go through, and so we would look at the exit criteria, what you need to exit that stage. So the exit of the awareness interest stage is you want a qualified lead. The exit of the first meeting is you want a second meeting with the boss or others and the team that you need approval for. And then the exit of that second meeting is to get approval to set an eval or a trial and so forth. So you can see sort of clearly what needs to get done. And then for each one, they would say, in the awareness interested, the best lead source was a referral from AT&T and Apple, because at that time, Apple wanted to sell more iPhones to the enterprise, and clearly AT&T was the exclusive reseller in the United States. So it was about working closely with them to get referrals, and so Mobile Iron becomes their preferred vendor. And then questions that we asked to qualify. So sort of outlining like this, and the two things that were important is this wow. And I'm going to talk more about the wow later, but the wow is what got the customer excited enough to sort of lean in, engage, and then to say, this is the vendor I want to work with. And so we'll talk more about that, but it's something that is critical in this process. So here's an example of the playbook. And let's go through it in a bit more detail. so understand. The first is, as I said, the customer journey. And the customer journey is an outside-in view. It's from the customer's perspective, not an inside-out view in terms of what your sales and marketing process is. So at the bottom is a typical marketing and sales process that you get from Salesforce, HubSpot, all of the companies that are selling sales and marketing techniques where you say go from visitors to leads, opportunity, win, renewal, upsell, then you get a happy customer and so forth. Customers don't think that way. What customers think about is, well, I got an urgent pain, so I got to do something. If there's no urgent pain, it's like, why do anything? So you have an urgent pain, then a wow is why they're interested in you. You sign the first contract, first value. I'm going to go through this in more detail. So as I mentioned, every customer journey begins with an urgent pain, which answers the question, why buy now? And that's why it's so important to generating leads, because if you cannot clearly articulate what the urgent pain is, then your employees probably cannot articulate it, and the whole go-to-market motion will be tough because there is no urgent pain. Now, many times you wonder then, what is the end of the customer journey? It could be getting them to buy a lot, getting them fully deployed, getting them to keep renewing. That's what vendors think. From a customer standpoint, that's not really relevant. From their standpoint, they want to become a hero. They want the product to become so strategic in their offering, in their company, that they become recognized as a hero and get promoted. So I'll give you an example at Marketo. Marketo was a marketing SaaS company. I was on the board for 10 years. We invested when there were 15 employees. We exited at 1.8 billion. And Marketo initially was just a simple email marketing product. You can call it spam. But, and the people that used Marketo initially were managers of email marketing. But Marketo taught people how to use this to generate pipeline. And this whole process of using email and other ways to generate pipeline through nurturing became known as demand generation. And companies were looking then for directors and VP of demand generation. So Marketo users became VP of demand generation. Well, CEOs wanted to hire CMOs that could generate pipeline too. And so the demand generation leaders became future CMOs. So what happened is that many Marketo users ended up becoming future CMOs. So it's showing an example of how, as a vendor, you help your customer, your champion succeed and become a hero and get promoted to becoming an executive. That allows you to do thought leadership, which is about educating your market on how to become become a hero. And it's about sharing these hero stories rather than just sell your product. It's more about how your champion becomes the hero in their story. The next thing that's really important after urgent pain is this wow. And that answers the question, why you? If you don't have a wow, this whole go-to-market process is very hard. What the wow is something that if you share in a meeting, it could be a feature, a demo, or a slide, or a customer quote, whatever, you share something, and all of a sudden the customer's body language changes from, I had to be in this meeting because I was forced to as a favor to a friend, to, this is really interesting. It's when you can see a change in behavior where a person leans in, says, tell me more, and and says, I want my boss to see it. I want my other colleagues to see it. Knowing what exactly triggers that is critical, because that is your wow. Without a wow, it's a very hard sales process. But once you identify it, it becomes good because you have the urgent pain, you identify the wow for your ICP, and all of a sudden you have something that it can be repeatable. So a key step here is also first value, which is when many times what people define it as is successfully onboarded. Customers don't care that way. What customers think of first value is when their peers or their boss says, hey, you made the right decision. This looks good. That's when they feel like they've got first value from the product. These are different examples of different companies of what they viewed first value to be. First value also defines, from a go-to-market standpoint, two key phases. One is land, and the other is expand. So this is how you land new customers and then expand your customers as well too. Dividing this up is very important when it comes to metrics and organization and scaling, all that going forward. So what I just focus on is the land playbook. And so this will be example of the customer journey on the land side. And then these will be the stages that the company will need to do to leverage the urgent pain to the wow, and then to get them to sign a contract, and then to deliver first value. So you have the customer journey, and then you map under it what the different stages are in your playbook. And then what sales and marketing needs to do at each stage to advance customers to the next step, and what the rest of the company needs to do at each of these stages as well too. So doing this in one page forces sort of the abstract what's important, and sort of can help the company then start executing on their particular playbook and go to market. These playbook stages vary depending upon what your go-to-market strategy is. The top one is if you have a sales-led growth. The bottom one is if you have a product-led growth. There's others if you have marketing-led. I mean, there's different types of go-to-market strategies, but at the end of the day, it's always there's the customer journey on top and what playbook stages you need to follow to make this an executable path. So how you get the data to build this, it turns out to be harder than I thought. And to me, it's sort of obvious, but as we work with our companies, we found it to be challenging. And so what we have gone through, and we're doing this now as a workshop, and our goal is to make it a self-serve workshop available to everyone, is you do a deal-by-deal review where you ask these questions like, who's the buyer, how do they use it, why buy now, why win and lose. You look for go-to-market patterns like why win or lose, what deal's going faster, slower, why are customers interested, why they're not interested. Then with that, you identify the go-to-market blocks, and with that, you build your playbook. We go through this. There's actually a spreadsheet and others that we work with, but it turns out it works fairly effectively well. And so with that, you get your playbook. The next phase is how do you sort of operationalize the playbook, and with that, you get scale. So you have the playbook, as I mentioned, and you figure out which teams take what parts, like this is marketing, sales, customer success, and product, and that's fine. But when you do this, what you'll find is that these handoffs is where the implementation and execution of the playbook can fail. So I'll just talk about three particular handoffs. One is from marketing to sales on new pipeline generation. So marketing generates new pipeline with inbound, and then sales says, that's great, but we can't close. Product builds a lot of new features, but it doesn't impact the win rate, which impacts sales. Or sales closes a lot of customers, but customer success can't retain them, and so it kills the net revenue retention. So I'll talk about each one in a bit more detail. So for marketing and sales handoff, this is the chart I like to use. It's a cohort analysis. So on the column in green, it looks great. You know, marketing looks like they're doing a great job as new pipeline goes from 500,000 to 1 million, 2 million, 2.5, 3 million per quarter. So it looks like marketing is doing a great job scaling. But if you track conversion of that pipeline, you can see how it dropped from 17% to 10%. So you're generating a lot of new pipeline, but sales can't close a new pipeline. And this happened for one of my companies, and this chart really helped. And in that case, what happened is that marketing started pushing a new use case which sales wasn't ready for. And frankly, the product wasn't fully ready for. And so we got a new pipe, but it was not closable. Same thing on the product and sales. This is something that I found really helpful. This is also from one of our companies where time to first value kept dropping. And it finally got to a point where it was fast enough or easy enough that self-serve exploded. So time to first value, it turns out to be a critical product measure here. And lastly, here's another example of sales to customer success, where sales numbers kept going up, our lands kept going up, so it looks good, sales is closing a lot, but our net retention for the customer went down. So it turns out sales was over-promising the customer, and so we lose. So by having these kind of understanding the handoffs and understanding that each department works as silos and having the right metrics, you can find out early what's going on. So last thing is I just want to talk about metrics to use the playbook. The problem about B2B software metrics is there's so many of them, people get confused, there's a cacophony. What we try to do is to build a hierarchy of metrics where we say the bottom is all the customer journey, the top is end-to-end, and that you have these system and stage metrics and team metrics on the other side. So team metrics, here's an example of sort of team metrics from marketing. When you go to a board meeting, you can see tons of these kind of team metrics. Stage metrics these are the different stages. And so once you know the stages, you can start having like this kind of pipeline analysis. In this particular case, the conversion from interest to first meeting was only 42%. And so what that showed us is they just had a weak wow. And so they had a problem in that particular manner here. System metrics, this is land and expand. What you see is the way people measure expand is by net dollar retention metrics. And these are public companies, they're doing very well, and you can see that their net retention metric is like 183% down to 115%. If it's 183%, it means the company is going to grow 83% even if they have no new customers. And so if you look down in the average of companies with usage-based pricing that went public, they were growing at 46%, but 32% of that growth is from existing customers and only 14% are from new customers. So it's showing the importance of land and expand in terms of system. End-to-end is like net new ARR and ARR, and also the magic number that measures the productivity of that. So if you put it all together, what I like as the CEO is something like this. Think of the CEO as like the race car driver that is driving. You have your hands on the steering wheel, and you're trying to press the accelerator of how much cash you want to burn. So your speedometer is the end-to-end metric measuring growth, which is ARR and net new ARR. And then you have these sort of 4 gauges. One is, do you have go-to-market fit? And the way you measure that with the magic number. The second is, do you have product market fit? And you measure that with gross churn. And then are your unit economics good? You measure that with your gross margin. And then you have your cash gauge, which is, how much cash do you have? It's like your gas gauge. How much cash, when you're going to run out, and where your next refueling is. And then lastly, you're deciding, how much to spend on sales and marketing and non-sales and marketing. And so as a CEO, I think, you sort of look at it in this manner as you're trying to drive this race car. And so just to summarize, this is showing the go-to-market path to becoming a unicorn is you want to go from founder growth to unlocking growth to scaling growth, and then lastly to optimizing your growth model. And with that, you become the leader in your category, and then with that, you get recognized as the unicorn. So I like this slide because, as I mentioned, this explains the entire journey from founding idea to category leadership. And as you're finding product market fit, you want to answer these questions: why now, which is the urgent pain, and who, which is your ICP and use case. With that, you can then build a go-to-market playbook to get that repeatability and answer the question, why you, with the wow, have that, and then you're ready to scale and optimize growth and become the category leader. So this is sort of showing at sort of high level how you go from founding idea to category leader and making sure on the unlocking growth you fill out these particular elements. So with that, I really appreciate the time, but more importantly, I'm really interested in questions, and people can ask me here today or follow up on LinkedIn and ask questions, because frankly, that's how we get better. As I mentioned, this whole second sort of iteration of unlocking growth to me is no different than what we wrote the first time, but what I thought and what people interpreted were two different things. So with that, thank you very much and appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And next session is the Q&A session. We have the question to you.
Okay.
The first question it is, you mentioned that the urgent pain changes all the time, yet product development takes several months, and if not years. In this case, how should we predict this?
I mean, it's hard, and that's why agile startups win. I mean, I'll give you an example of how urgent pain changes. Think of COVID. You know, you think of like video conferencing before and after COVID. Before COVID, it was nice. With the lockdowns, it became an urgent pain for many people, and you know, Zoom took off. So that's an example of how an urgent pain can appear like this. Another is if there's a new regulation that gets adopted, then all of a sudden companies have an urgent pain. So it really helps to, number one, to have a very good sales and marketing team out there to identify new urgent pains as fast as possible and have a product team that's flexible enough to adapt to that new urgent pain.
Thank you very much for your answering. Okay. 네, 저쪽에 마이크 부탁드리겠습니다.
Dr. Nahm, it was a very excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And my name is Tae-Sing Lee. I'm the president-elect for the Korean Federation of Scientists and Engineer Association. You make the unicorn maker, but now young guys say it's startup. So, but usually not only young guys, but also we are the senior startup too. So, do you have any advice for the senior startup? And also, they need some advice for startup should start in Korea or in United States. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think mentors and experienced executives are critical for every company. And the people can be here, and you know, many times having someone that's local that you can have dinner with is the best thing. So if you're a Korean founder, I think having Korean mentors that you can have dinners with once a week is very critical. It's something that foreigners cannot do. And we find it to be very helpful. So in fact, we actively encourage every one of our CEOs and execs to have mentors and to give mentor stock options.
Thank you very much. We have the other question to you. The question it is, as a VC, how do you find the right company to invest, especially in the early stage?
Right. So you can think of it as we're looking at the company and saying once we invest, we're going to be with the company for 5 to 15 years. So it's going to be part of this company journey, and we're trying to sort of think, can this company go from here to becoming that category leader and become that surfing unicorn? So we're trying to see whether the company can become a surfing unicorn. And part of it is that you know, you have to make sure the wave is big enough so that and then the second is whether the founder can grow into becoming a surfer. To give you an example, our two best companies right now have two very different profiles as CEOs. One company, he founded the company when he was 24 years old. It's basically his first job, And that company now is worth $10 billion. And he's the founder, CEO of the company, and they're doing over $300 million in revenue. Our second best company, the founder of the company was senior vice president in a multi-billion-dollar company. He started a company and sold it for $1 billion, and this is his third company as an executive, and they just closed a round of $5 billion. So two different examples, but we find that you can have people that sort of grow into becoming great surfers with a big wave that they can catch.
Thank you very much. 질문이 있으신 분은요, 손을 들어주시면 저희가 질문을 더 받도록 하겠습니다. 네, 마이크 전달 부탁드리겠습니다.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is David. I'm currently working as a product manager at a healthcare startup. You mentioned urgent pain, and you also mentioned COVID, that urgent pain could change over time, and it could happen all of a sudden. But we're not always prepared for the solution for that urgent pain. And it's not easy to predict, I assume. So I just want to hear your thoughts on what the urgent pains could be in the future. Your prediction would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, being identifying that urgent pain is so important, that's why I think founders and companies that are listening, actively listening and questioning is important. I mean, as I said, this Spring Health, who's a multi-billion-dollar company in the healthcare space, found the urgent pain with a set of customers that they had no product for in the beginning. But just they heard that it could be, and then they actively went and quickly investigated. It doesn't mean you have to build a product immediately, but the fact that they heard, and so people are sensitive and then move. What we find is that with most founders and companies, that they believe so much in their founding idea that they're not willing to consider adjacencies. So if you have an open mind and are curious and are data-driven, then you can see things emerge and then just quickly verify. So that tells you how to identify it early. And, customers tell you. It's always good when you go to a customer, instead of just selling your product, to spend some time and saying, what else are you finding that's interesting? Or what's causing you a lot of pain right now? Just that kind of engagement and asking is how you can get early indications of an impending urgent pain. And then you need to just have an organization that's sort of agile enough to adapt.
Thank you very much. 혹시 또 뒤쪽에 마이크 전달드리겠습니다.
Hello, my name is Jay of Thumb Technology. We're a very early stage startup. Thanks for the presentation. It was very insightful. I have a quick question, because on your path to unicorn slide, the first step was founder growth, and then the next step was kind of unlocking growth, right? And it sounds like kind of when that happens is when you find that initial kind of product market fit, right? But how would you know that you're ready to kind of move to that second step? Would you have any advice on when is the best time to actually hire the first salesperson and all that?
Yes, so those are two different questions. So the first one is, how do you know you're ready to move from founder-led growth to unlocking growth? As soon as you can start selling, people want to sell more than just the founder. I mean, the exception is that if you're selling a chip and your only customer is Samsung Galaxy or Apple iPhone, that's different. If you only have one customer, founders can sell. But usually in cases you want to get 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers, 100,000 customers, and no way one person can do that. So companies are highly motivated as soon as they get some customers to say, how can we get more? So what we do is at that point is, as you have founders selling, many times we struggle because founders think, I can sell so the next person can sell. So we have to sort of overcome that. And then the next thing that many times founders do is that let me just hire a VP of sales or a CRO and they'll take care of all that. And that doesn't work either. It may, but it rarely works. You know, it's like, as I say, hiring the superhero Thor, and unless you figure these blocks out, they just can't. Someone's got to figure it out. So what we do is, in the beginning is, you have the founder selling, and we recommend to the founder to hire like 2 to 4 reps. And they're not VP of sales level, but 2 to 4 reps to work with the founder and start closing deals. And to see whether or not those reps will become productive. Why 2 to 4? If you hire only 1 rep and it doesn't work out, you don't know whether it's the rep or whether it's the sales process. So you need at least 2, but ideally 3 to 4, so you have some statistical variation. And then if you have 4 reps, 2 work, then hopefully you now have a template that says if I hire the reps like that, then we can replicate and scale. Because it's all about trying to find that repeatable process that you can then clone and scale. That's how you unlock growth. You can't clone the founder. That just doesn't work. So you have to have some other repeatable process that you can clone and scale. But the other is if you don't have an urgent pain and catch a wave, you can have the best process, but you'll never grow. So that's why we found you need to get a lot of leads, which is the urgent pain, and have this repeatable process for normal people, not founders, that with those two together, you're ready to scale.
Thank you very much. 혹시 또 질문 있으시면은 손 들어 주시기 바라겠습니다. 네, 감사드립니다. Thank you very much
Okay,
for
thank
your
you. Yes, and by the way, people are interested, we're happy to share the presentation over, just let me know through LinkedIn. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again. 네.